Hello, my name is Alex Isles, and in today's episode we're going to be talking about my favourite finds from the digs at Lindisfarne. Welcome back. So, in today's episode we're going to be talking about some of the finds that have been discovered at Lindisfarne, and these are quite amazing pieces. Over the course of 6 years, they've discovered an amazing range of things, from gaming counters right the way through to headstones or name stones as they're called, which is like an Anglo-Saxon gravestone, coins and items like that. And I'm going to talk about some of my favourite ones. So if you like the sound of that, why not subscribe now, because I've got plenty more content like this on the channel and I really think you'll enjoy it here. And now that you've done that, why don't we jump straight in? So, to start off with, I'm going to start talking about name stones. Now, when I started my dig at Lindisfarne, on the first day, right next to me, someone was picking up a piece of stone that was a part of a lined burial, and it was handed over to Dr. David Petts, who was there at the site. He turned it over, and there was the carving of an Anglo-Saxon name stone, and it should be on the screen right now. Now, when you have this Anglo-Saxon name stone, these are the equivalent of what we'd today call a tombstone. So you would put that above your burial plot and it would have the name of the person on it. And when you had the name of the person on it, it was to encourage people to pray for the soul of that person whenever they went past it. So as you were walking beside the old monastery, there would be hundreds of these in the ground, and you would see them and they would be reminders to pray for certain people who had passed away, and their bodies would obviously be underneath there. Now, the really interesting thing about the name stone that you can see in this image on the screen now was it was actually reused as a part of a lined burial. So you can see that the older name stones, as when they're cleaning up maybe a grave point or they're cleaning up a section of the monastery where they've got a number of burials that have stopped being used, or they're now inserting new burials in, they've taken up the old name stone and they've used it as a part of a lined burial. So when you've got this lined burial, you'd have stones down the side and at the top, creating what we'd sort of think of as a coffin shape, and they've just put this name stone into the side of it. Now, there are wonderful name stones from all over the northeast, so in places like Jarrow, Hartlepool, Lindisfarne, they all come up from these locations, and they're wonderful because they've got the same sort of designs that you see on the Lindisfarne Gospels on them. So I'd definitely suggest having a look, and down in the description you can actually have a look at the Dig Ventures website, where they've actually 3D scanned a lot of these, and you can have a real in-depth look at some of the amazing name stones from the northeast of England. So the next thing is a coin of King Egbert, and Egbert is a really interesting Northumbrian monarch. So on this coin you can see on the front side it's got the name of the monarch, as you'd expect, around the outside. Just like today when you've got our current British coins, you have the face of King Charles III on it, or obviously previously you also would have his mother, Queen Elizabeth II. And when you have that around the outside is the name of the monarch and their statement of them being king or queen. When you've got those, right here we have a similar thing. You can see the name of the monarch, and on the reverse side there is this amazing creature. Now, I think it's wonderful because it fits into this body of weird mythological creatures, because you can't be sure if it's a dragon, is it a stag, is it another creature. There are so many different options and I absolutely love that. So it falls into the same sort of body of creatures as like stuff like the Bamborough Beast, which is an amazing little piece of gold working from Bamborough Castle. There's all these other sort of semi-mythical creatures as well that you can see carved into other Anglo-Saxon work, such as the amazing animals that you see on Anglo-Saxon standing crosses and stuff like that. So this creature on the coin you see here, I almost like to imagine it of being like a stag crossed with a dragon, but I'll let you decide. The other interesting thing about the coin is that Egbert had only become King of Northumbria after his cousin Ceolwulf had been forced to abdicate and had gone to Lindisfarne to actually become a monk there. So we have coins of King Egbert being used to buy, sell and trade at Lindisfarne, while the previous king is a member of the monastery there. And so you have this wonderful little political setup where you've got a previous king of Northumbria who is watching, possibly as coins, with the name of his cousin now being used while he is there, now getting into the monastic lifestyle. So a really interesting one again for a bit of social history. I'm wondering, how did Ceolwulf feel about this and seeing his cousin's coinage in use? But yeah, another wonderful little bit of history right there. So the next item is a gaming counter from a game that the Vikings or the Scandinavians called Nefertafel. And this is a king piece. So when you've got this king piece, it would be in the center of the board, and it was a game slightly similar to chess, where obviously the king would have his retainers around him, and then alongside having his retainers around him, you'd have the enemy army, and you'd have to surround and take out the king. So this gaming piece here shows that the monks at Lindisfarne weren't just spending all of their time praying and doing monastic jobs. They would also have downtime where they would be playing games, and they would have their own fun as well. It also shows connections possibly with Scandinavia as well, even after the Viking raids. So with that Viking raids, they're still trading across the North Sea, and it could be possibly that there were Scandinavians who joined the monastery at Lindisfarne and brought their games with them. It's one of those things that hopefully over the next few years of digs, more information will be found out, and they'll maybe be able to see more of a clear connection between these two different cultures across the North Sea. But again, there's enough of a similarity between the Anglo-Saxon culture and the Scandinavian culture during the early medieval period that games and ideas and things like that would be shared between the different cultures. And so this gaming piece here, which is a wonderful little piece of glass where you can see the glass has been twisted to create those wonderful colours, and then droplets of the glass have been put on to create the crown on the gaming piece. It's just absolutely fantastic. And this was discovered obviously during the digs and adds to this greater and greater picture of what the monastery at Lindisfarne was like. So the next discovery I'd like to look at is a focal burial. And a focal burial is where you would have a central burial and then others buried around it. In this case, it's a chest burial. And so pieces of ironwork were discovered. And when you've got this chest burial, there would be someone buried inside of a box, which would be a chest, so like a large storage container, and then subsequent burials were buried around it. And one of the things they discovered at Lindisfarne was there were a lot of children buried around this central burial. Now, one of the interpretations behind this is that when you had infant deaths, the idea was you bury them next to someone who maybe was known particularly well for working with children during their lifetime. And obviously back then, in the early Middle Ages, and in some denominations of Christianity to this day, there is a belief in the concept of purgatory. And so when you have this belief in purgatory, the children would then end up in purgatory alongside this adult. And the adult's job was to take them with them when it came to taking them to heaven. And so on Judgment Day, the children would then be taken alongside with this adult to Judgment Day, and then they would take them on the journey to heaven. And I don't know where you're sitting when you're watching this video or what your views are, your faith or anything like that, but there's something kind of beautiful about this. Every culture throughout history has had to deal with tragedy, and losing a child is one of the most horrendous tragedies that people can go through. And so when you've got this tragedy right here, this is a way that this culture and this society is learning to deal with this grief. And obviously there's a belief in heaven, there is a belief in purgatory, and so they've chosen to bury these children around this individual who is known maybe for their piousness or for their kindness to children or for whatever reason, and then this person is responsible for taking these children with them to heaven, to the afterlife. And so there's a great beauty in that, not only for seeing the human experience of these people wanting their children to obviously experience the afterlife, to have eternal life, and in this case a Christian eternal life, but there's also the beauty in knowing that that would have helped with grief, that would have helped with difficulties, all of the pain that comes from those adults who are left behind, having to deal with the loss of a child and all of that. So there is something wonderful about that, even in the tragedy of it. And so that's why I've included this focal burial, and I think it's such an amazing little bit of the story of Lindisfarne as well. Finally, we've got these items here, and these are prayer beads, and these were made from the spinal column of a salmon. Now, this is a wonderful little thing because some of you might have a Catholic background, or some of you may just recognize them from popular media, film, TV, that sort of things. But the prayer beads are obviously to help someone to go through the rosary, and you go through the Catholic rosary saying prayers and basically helping you to focus throughout the year as you go through on various different aspects of the Christian walk. So when you've got this rosary, someone has made it. They've taken a salmon, so obviously they're very common. You can get a lot of salmon. In fact, one of the biggest rivers in Britain for salmon is the Tweed, up near where today we have Berwick-upon-Tweed. And so when you've got the River Tweed, you could easily imagine someone in the Anglo-Saxon period fishing for this salmon, eating it with their family, and then taking the spinal column and carving the spinal column of this salmon into the rosary beads, so that they have their own rosary beads and they go through these prayers. And so it's a personally made item that helps them to go through their Christian walk, through their Christian journey. And it's just such a human item. It's an item that helps someone with their faith, someone with their day-to-day life. And it's just something very beautiful about that. And so when we're thinking about this monastery on Lindisfarne, we can't just reduce it down or boil it down to, oh, the Vikings attacked Lindisfarne in 793. We have thousands of people throughout the whole of Northumbria interacting with this island, which has got a focal monastery, which is an important site for the Christian observance and the experience of Christian worship within this region. And it's not just about, you know, the monks sitting there. It's also about women and children. It's about people acting out their faith. It's about gaming counters being traded, or like the idea of games and leisure being shared between Scandinavia and Northern England. And so many other concepts as well, like for instance, praying for the dead and stuff like that. So when I look at these finds from Lindisfarne, it gives us another aspect of life into human society that really just helps us to understand more of our own existence and also the existence of people in the past. So I hope you understand why I get so passionate about this. I really hope you've enjoyed today's video, and as always, if you have done, please do like and subscribe, share the video with your friends, and if you'd like to support me further, I do have a Patreon and a Ko-fi account in the description below, but there's no pressure from me whatsoever for you to do that. I really hope you've enjoyed today's video and you'll join me for another one in the near future. But until then, stay safe and well, and thank you so much.